Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have with us Robert Siciliano. He is a cybersecurity awareness expert, private investigator, creator of the strategic human firewall. So we'll learn from him about how one can record the real threats from AI-powered deepfake scams and voice close to six-figure typo wire fraud in real estate. We'll learn about how to think like a hacker to protect your bank account, why digital estate planning is crucial, and he delivers straight talk on passwords, device security, and the "it won't happen to me" myth. Welcome to the show, Robert.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
You're welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form, Robert. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe, a lot of companies and leaders across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll talk about hacks, we'll talk about scams, and we'll talk about digital safety and much more. But before that, let's talk a bit about your journey, your background, so that people know who they are listening to.
Sure. My journey's pretty simple. I started off, teaching personal protection as it relates to violence prevention as early as a teen. And in my mid-20s, I had a small business where I was providing products and services for personal protection. I had an IBM PS1 consultant computer, which essentially was an old school IBM with a 150 megabyte hard drive and a Windows 3.0 OS. And I got hacked. I lost thousands of dollars in credit card fraud back in the mid-90s. And I was astonished at what they could do. And I wanted to understand how it happened. And essentially, that became a mission. From that point on, I started to see criminal hacking as a thing, a very profitable opportunity for criminals to make money off of people like you and I that work really hard. And so from the late 90s to the early 2000s, I started to see lots of identity theft and data breaches happening left and right. And really, it's really gotten a lot worse today. It's not gotten any better. And I don't know that the general public today is any more aware of mitigating a risk now as they were 25, 30 years ago.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Robert. So to understand it basically from a common man's perspective is that which is the biggest threat for them in today's time? There are hundreds of threats people talk about. One day or the other, they keep on talking about how one get scammed, and so many things, so many different words, and so that is where I want to start from the biggest one. Which is the biggest one that should people be aware about?
Yeah, right now, AI, artificial intelligence driven social engineering essentially bypasses, those technical perimeters that companies have set up, which means, cybersecurity employee training has become the most critical line of defense for employees. And that same training is necessary for, general consumers to mitigate what I call the human blind spot, which is that psychological instinct to trust what's familiar. We all need to engage in what I call the strategic human firewall. Okay. That means you and I, right? The essential shift from I trust what I see, which is, when the emails come in, text messages come in, you get even phone calls, phishing and so forth, to I verify everything. So essentially, while, technical firewalls block viruses, what I call the strategic human firewall blocks deception. It's you becoming that firewall, right? In reality, where artificial intelligence generates the perfect lies through deep fakes, synthetic identities, security really breaks down to the point of human interaction. We are not capable of telling truth from lie with AI deep fakes and voice cloning. So the idea is to rewire yourself and your employees to stop defaulting to trust and start verifying every single critical action through what I would consider like a mandated offline protocol.
Absolutely, Robert. That's too much of a context switching, if I may call it, that in real life, you default to trust. Inside this whole systems, you are always defaulting to not trusting. Is it so that easy for humans? What is your understanding of this, Robert?
So, since we've been born, as what we call an interdependent species, we depend on each other for our survival. We would not exist without each other effectively, to procreate. And as an interdependent species, we require that we trust one another. And that means that throughout the day, the people that you correspond with in person, who you email, text, and receive phone calls from, that you essentially biologically want to and need to trust each other, which means that overall, we give others the benefit of the doubt on an ongoing basis. And the bad guys, the bad actors, they know that we trust by default, and they use truthful scenarios against us. And so when we engage in all these truthful scenarios, wanting to believe that the person on the other end doesn't have bad intentions, it's likely we're going to click that link, provide that sensitive information, engage that sociopath and psychopath in such a way where they will eventually hook us. So our job is to really not be so trusting, to recognize that these things can happen to us. And when you engage that human on the other end of the line, to look at and to determine what might their motivations be and how might this be used against me.
Absolutely. So who are the ones, who are the main targets? We sometimes hear of young people, then we also hear of older people who have got money for pension and all that stuff, lots of amounts of money. Several times in India, we have heard people have been scammed, all those digital arrest scams, if you have read about that, all those things. Is there any target audience that these scammers have in mind always?
So, yeah, certainly young people are a target. They grow up with digital devices. They're not so great with security. However, they are that much more technically savvy. But, we have known for decades that seniors, essentially the elderly, they generally have more wealth. Okay. And so when you have more wealth, you are by default going to be a target. And the elderly or seniors, not only do they have more wealth, but because of the way that they were raised, they're a bit more trusting as well. So they have the most money, they're a bit more trusting, and they're not as technically savvy. And in the end, they're cognitively declining. And that really makes the perfect storm for criminals. Additionally to that, 25% of all humans regularly experience loneliness. Loneliness is a common denominator in many people. And when you are lonely, which they call it the pain and the ache of loneliness, and loneliness is there inherently so that we would gravitate towards other humans to, again, procreate. Loneliness is a normal and natural pain and ache that we experience, not any different than hunger pains. Hunger pains drive you towards food to nourish your body. Loneliness drives you towards humans, essentially to, again, procreate. And so when attackers know that the elderly seniors are lonely, moneyed, cognitively declining, the most trusting, right, then it's just a matter of time until they get hooked. So it's important that not only do they be aware of the risks inherent in the inbound communications being scammed, but you and I, we have to watch out for them. We have to watch out for our parents, our grandparents, to make sure that whatever risks they face, that we're there to assist them, and in some cases to protect them.
Right, Robert. So a lot of people, personally also I have talked to a few people, they seem to have an idea that these are, as you get individuals who are operating in one place or the other, somebody who needs money, desperate for money. A lot of news reports have also revealed, but general people do not know, a lot of them, that in some places it's almost institutionalized. Big buildings have come where criminals have kidnapped people, experts, and put them into places in border areas, in places, I don't want to take any names here, and then they are forced, or they have a full system which is, operating like like a commercial company, and then that is where it operates. For them, it is big business, either by coercion or by their willingness. I want to understand, in terms of that you talk about, it won't happen to me. How would you like to put these things together so that more and more people are aware across the globe?
Yeah, so you bring up a really good point. Organized crime is involved in cybercrime to the degree where it's a multi-billion-dollar operation. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. Organized crime is making as a result of the hard work of people like you and I. These operations function all over the world. Many in Southeast Asia, Myanmar being one of those places. They have operations that are in excess of 100 acres, 100-acre compounds that have, like you said, big buildings, housing, cafeterias, lots of technology, where the United Nations says that there are as many as 300,000 victims of human trafficking whose sole job 18 hours a day is to scam you and I, sending out text messages and emails, making phone calls, and to engage us and the elderly and others in various forms of scams. And so these victims of human trafficking, they are tortured and beaten if they're not making their quotas. These are people who find a job online, and the job listing says there's room for advancement, there's bonuses, it's free food, free housing, and they take the job. They even get on a plane, sometimes on a bus. And once they get there, their passports are confiscated and they're held against their will. So that's what you and I are up against. And the fact that many of us look at security really as a form of paranoia, interestingly. We look at security as, it's one of those things where people who engage in security practices, they must be looking over their shoulder. They must think that people are out to get them. That's why they're always thinking about security, because they live in fear. They worry. That's how a lot of people look at security practices, which is really not what security is. Security is about being in control. People who worry, people who look over their shoulder, people who are essentially what we call paranoid, are the ones that, they're suffering a mental health issue, but they're not engaged in security practices. Like, it's two different things. And as a result of people looking at security as a form of paranoia, what most do instead is they function in a state of denial. They deny that these things can't happen to me. Why would hackers target me? Why would they go after my identity? Why would they steal money from my bank account? Why would they target my home? And they say, well, I don't want to think about those things. I would rather, not think about crime happening to me, which essentially means that they function in denial and they don't do anything about it. So with organized crime being involved, and they're making a ton of money, and many consumers looking at security as a form of paranoia, and then effectively functioning in denial, they're not doing anything about it. They're not putting systems in place. Therefore, they're often the ones that are victimized.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What to do when some people think they are very smart? Nothing will happen. It can be friends, it can be family also, and you can do nothing. And afterwards, almost there is nothing to do. How would you want to tell the extra smart people about smartness, about these things?
Yeah. Well, look I'm 57 years old, and I learned a long time ago, that the moment that I think that I know everything, the reality is I know nothing, because life is a learning experience. I'm still learning every single day. I'm learning about myself. I'm learning about my spouse. I'm learning about my kids. I'm learning about the world around me. And, life lessons just keep coming at us. And by listening, really to a podcast like this and understanding what the risks are, and then understanding, what it is that we need to do, what systems and strategies that we need to put in place to reduce that risk, to protect ourselves, to protect our money in our bank accounts, to protect our loved ones, and just simply like recognizing that, risk is one of those things that we all have to manage. The chance of something bad happening to me or you is actually relatively slim, but there's a chance. Similarly to, there's a chance that you could be injured in a motor vehicle accident. And the smart thing to do is to put the seatbelt on. And you don't put the seatbelt on because you worry or because you're paranoid. You put the seatbelt on because it is the smart thing to do. And if we just adopt that mindset that engaging in basic 101 cyber digital literacy, cyber hygiene, cybersecurity 101, easy stuff, is the smart thing to do, then I think that smart people will recognize that and adopt those principles.
Absolutely. You talked about your own experience when you lost quite a bit of money many, many years back. Afterwards, in all these years, did you ever come to getting scammed in any way? And then last minute you say, how was that? What made you, save yourself in all those years? Was it your smartness? Was it because you talk about these things? Or was it being very, very human like a common person?
So I don't consider myself to be all that additionally, intelligent or smart about this stuff myself at all. I think that over the years, I've developed a certain awareness. We call it situational awareness. So in personal security or personal protection, you're out, you're taking a walk, a midnight stroll, let's say, or just walking through the park, after hours or early morning. And as you're walking through the park, you're looking to the right, looking to the left, paying attention to what's going on behind you, looking for somebody paying any unwanted attention to you. That's security awareness. That's situational awareness in the physical world. Well, we also need to be aware, situational awareness, as the phone rings, as emails come in, as we get text messages. And you look at the phone and say, okay, in the situation that I'm in right now, what is the motivation of the person on the other end? What might they really want from me? What might they need from me? What is their real intentions of me? And so if we acknowledge the situations that we're in, both in the physical world and with our digital devices, and we think about what the motivations are of the person on the other end, and we pay attention to that stuff and we think it through, right? Be well thought out in that regard. I think that we have a much better chance of, essentially defending ourselves. And to this very day, probably even yesterday, I received an email yesterday that it was in regards to a payment that was made to me. Now, I am actually seeking payments that have been made to me by vendors, by clients that they're a little late paying their bills. And so I wasn't sure if the email was from a client who owes me money, or I looked at it, was this actually a scammer? And it came into my inbox. It didn't go into my spam filter. It came into my inbox. So my inclination was maybe this is my client who's finally paying their bill. And as I investigated it, before I actually clicked on links, opened up attachments, downloaded files, I looked at the email address it came from. I hovered over the link. I looked at the link to see where that came from. I searched the name of the person who was sending me the communication in my email program. And I determined that I don't know this person, that I don't think that this is actually anybody that I have a relationship with. I don't think this is one of my clients. It took me a little research, but before I actually reacted, responded, clicked links, downloaded files, I got smart about it, smart as in I investigated it. I checked out the situation that I was in, and I was aware that this could be a scam before I allowed it to actually affect or infect me. And I think that if we kind of stop and pay attention, I think we have a much better chance of warding off the bad actors.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Robert. A lot of people think, that in today's time, there is nothing called security in terms of, because your systems you are already sharing a lot of information with either, your email providers, Gmail, Microsoft, or any of these things. You have integrated to ease your life into, easy responses, and also that they can read it. It can make your life easy. And so, and also heard stories, that none of these, antiviruses and money mode systems will not ever protect you. Even big companies keep on sending those emails, similar emails, that we are very sorry, your data has been breached, please change your password. And that seems to be the only solution for even the biggest companies in the world, be it banks or anywhere else. So general perception is either I have to become a hacker, topmost guy of this, or either I leave it to divine providence, divinity. He or she will save me. Otherwise, I don't have anything to lose. I will try to be as secure as possible, but they don't do nothing beyond the antivirus.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. Look at cybersecurity as we know it is about 20 to 30 years old, right? The digital devices that we enjoy today, laptops, computers, mobile phones, passwords, two-factor authentication, antivirus, all of these various technologies that you and I are using right now have only been around for like less than a third of our lives. They're relatively new to humanity in general. So I understand that it can be, a bit overwhelming, a bit confusing. The reality of it is, much like learning to drive a car, it's a skill. It's something that you have to, get good at in order to get your driver's license. And even as you continue to drive that car, you still have to pay attention. You still have to put your seatbelt on. You still have to be aware of the risks as you're driving, right? Whether it's inclement weather or somebody swerves in front of you, or you're driving when it's, late at night, you always have to be paying attention because there are always risks when you get behind the wheel. And it's the same thing with accessing your mobile phone, your laptop, your desktop, accessing the internet. You always have to be aware of the risks because just like the seatbelt, antivirus, password managers, two-factor authentication, updating your operating system, these are all, risk reduction strategies. Again, just like paying attention when you're driving, just like putting that seatbelt on, that we have to engage in. We're supposed to engage in. And while it can be overwhelming, we still need to do it. If you want to protect your identity, if you want to protect your data and your dollars and your bank accounts, then you have to continually engage in these processes. But as long as you look at it as something like it's a necessity, like, getting a good night's sleep, eating good foods, consuming enough fluids throughout the day so you don't become dehydrated, taking care of your mental health, taking care of your physical health. These are all processes and strategies that we are required to do to a certain degree. And cybersecurity really is no different than any of that stuff. And as long as you just make an effort and say, it can happen to me, and you put these basic systems in place, you become what we call a hard target. And the hard target is the one that the bad guys bypass, because the hard target is the one that is, or the person that is doing what they're supposed to do to manage and reduce that risk.
Absolutely, absolutely. I thought new technology which they are going to protect us, but you talk about the strategic human firewall. Help us understand how does this solve the problem, and not looks like to be human technology, and not like some big tools that generally people talk about.
Yeah. So the strategic, understand that humans have what is called a security aversion, right? It's the natural resistance to security protocols because they feel uncomfortable. They feel that, it's fear-based, it's somewhat intrusive. And so the idea is to overcome that. And you overcome that by basically understanding and adopting what is called the strategic human firewall, which is a proprietary methodology that moves beyond the technical software to secure the human layer, me and you, by transforming us or employees into an active defense perimeter. The entire idea that is it blocks deception. It's a proactive governance, a mindset that turns employees, humans, from passive targets into an active detection layer. It's a shift from I trust what I see to verify everything, all to overcome the human blind spot, which again is that psychological instinct to trust the familiar, that cognitive gap where biological trust overrides digital suspicion, essentially leaving the door wide open for fraud and AI enhanced deception.
Absolutely. For a quick check on some of the solutions for an individual, what are some of the things that an individual should always remember? Also, as an employee or even as a business owner, some of the things. You also talk about the six-figure typo. Help us understand that also in this context.
You know, the easiest and most simple things that we can do right now that we should be doing is managing our passwords effectively. You know, when I get in front of a live audience and I ask 100 people, you know, how many of you are using a different passcode across all your critical accounts? Generally, the answers are maybe 15 to 20% of the room is using a different passcode, which means that generally 80+% of all of us are using the same passcode everywhere. And right now, there's been about 175 billion records compromised in the past decade or 15, 20 years, which means that there's about 15 billion compromised passcodes on the dark web. So if you're using a different passcode across multiple accounts, which means changing up your passcodes, you really need to use what's called a password manager to effectuate that. So once you adopt a password manager and use a different passcode across multiple accounts, you are, again, a harder target. Additionally, setting up two-factor authentication for all of those critical accounts is absolutely necessary. So with all of your online accounts, change up your passcodes, use a password manager, and use two-factor authentication, which means essentially you log in with your username and your passcode, and then you get a one-time passcode text to you, and then you log in using that second factor, which is that text via your phone. You are much more secure than 80 to 90% of the consumers out there.
Absolutely. And for companies, any particular thing you do, especially the six-figure typo that you talk for real estate?
Yeah, that's, look at when we buy homes and say your real estate agent that you work with, he or she is using the same passcode across multiple accounts. And bad guys infiltrate your real estate agent's email. Okay. Once they're inside your real estate agent's email, now the bad actor from inside your real estate agent's email can communicate with you, the buyer. And then from there, they can send you, the buyer, wiring instructions, right? Wiring instructions that are based on a bank account that the criminal has control over. And because that real estate agent didn't properly protect his or her email, you, the buyer, are now subject to significant financial fraud because you trust your real estate agent and you would trust that your real estate agent's email has not been compromised. But if and when it is, now you're wiring, say, 6 figures to a bank account controlled by the criminal.
Absolutely. There is so much to learn about all this. There's so much to learn also from your book, Robert. Tell us a bit about your book, how people can benefit from that.
Identity theft, privacy, security protection, and fraud prevention. One of 5 books that I've written. It's really all about my entire philosophy and what you and I need to do to manage and reduce risk. It's about understanding all the basics of information security, how to protect ourselves and our identities, how to protect our bank accounts, our data, and our dollars, and as employees, how to protect the data in which we are entrusted with at work. So all of this is easy to do. It really is easy to do. It's not much different, like I said, getting behind the wheel of a car and learning to drive and then just keeping up on, being aware of your surroundings in the form of situational awareness at all times. Every email you get, every text you get, every phone call you receive, just being cognitive, just being aware of what the motivations of that communication are and what you need to do to make sure that a bad actor does not become successful when they choose you as their next victim. Listen, there always has been, there is, and there always will be criminals out there looking for their next target. And they are choosing us on a daily basis. And all we need to do is just be a little bit more aware. Again, situational awareness, and we can significantly reduce all that risk.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Robert. There is, as I said, there's so much to learn from you. And I'm sure a lot of people would want to learn more from you, about you, and also from your books. What's the best way for them to do so?
So the easiest way to find me is Google me. Robert Siciliano, Siciliano, Robert Siciliano. I'm all over the webs. Or my website, safr.me. Again, safr.me. Or protectnowllc.com, protectnowllc.com.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.